I've decided I'm going to do a video on what I call edging. Some people call it trim, some people call it transition. This would be a transition, say, from your carpet in your bathroom to your tile in your bathroom proper. It protects the edge. If you're doing it on a floor, it would protect the edge of the tile from getting chipped, vacuum cleaner hitting it, things like that. So sometimes it's called different things. Profile is also a thing you might want to look up if you're looking for aluminum profile. That's what you would find. Sometimes they're Schluter, and I call them Schluter a lot of times by default. Custom Building Products makes them also. They come in basically two different sizes. You got 3/8 and you got 1/2 inch. And that really depends on the size of your tile. So this would be a 3/8, and this would be also a 3/8. A thicker tile is going to call for a larger one. So if you try and find one of these and you match it up exactly, you have to know that exactly that this is going to fit flush on the floor. Sometimes on a wall, on a vertical surface, your tile bumps out whatever the size of your thin set happens to be, and then you would not do a 3/8. At that point you would do a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to call them transition strips, edging, whatever you want to call them, is fine. They come like this that are squared off, which I really like. They really pop when you're putting them around a niche, for example. And this one is kind of a dull silver, kind of a polished or a rubbed nickel, if you will. Then you have this one, which I'm not really sure what to call that, because it's kind of a greenish type of color, but that one and this one would be like an oil rub bronze. And this one is rounded, but it also comes in the flat edge over here, just like this. This is another oil rub bronze. I think this one says, what does it say? Finish code. Okay, so this actually is a Schluter. This is a Jolly. They call it a Jolly. And, well, for all intents and purposes, an oil rub bronze. And all of these come in different colors. So anything that you want in oil rub bronze, like this rounded edge, you're also going to find in a flat edge, and you're also going to find in the square edge. So just to be clear, it doesn't really matter which one you pick. Ultimately, it's whatever, usually it's whatever all your other hardware is. So this one is obviously chrome, very shiny chrome. This one is that green color. I don't get called for this green color very often. And then this is just basically satin silver. That's basically all the different flavors. There are plastic ones out there as well, and you can get those in black and white and I think green, and there's probably 4 or 5 different colors that the plastic one comes in. And whether or not you choose aluminum or plastic, the process of cutting these are basically all the same way. And when I cut them, I'm very careful, because when I cut them back in the day, I used to try and use a hacksaw, and hacksaw works very well on it, but it takes a lot of time to do that. And if you use a miter box with a hacksaw, it takes even more time, and you're not always getting a good cut. So by default, I always use my chop saw, and if you can see on there, that's just a normal size wood blade. I've tried a metal blade before. It doesn't really work too well. So for my purposes, that works, but I also use scrap piece of wood. And I set the wood in there for 2 reasons. One, I find that the metal cuts a lot easier without the blade. If you don't do it correctly, this thing can fly back at you, and it can get locked up inside the blade and all that stuff. It's on a scale of 1 to 10 being dangerous, it could be potentially a 10. And if you don't do it right, and if you don't take care and cut it slow and all that stuff, you can definitely do your hand some damage, as well as your eyes and everything else. So wear protective eyewear as well. Not that it's that difficult, you know, but then again, I'm jaded because I do it so often. And so, as I said, these are used both on a floor and the edging for, say, a vertical surface going, say, on the edge of a shower. I use that also on curbs. But by and large, I'm using this edging for the profile on a niche. So like a rectangular type of niche thing. So I'm doing 45 cuts. Now, to be fair, most of these, I don't know if Custom makes them or not. I really haven't seen them. They probably do. But I know Schluter makes the little corner pieces. So if you don't want to do the cutting, you can actually slide one of those corner pieces in there, and it kind of does the transition by itself. And that way, all you have to do is a straight cut, put the corner piece in there, and then the other side of the corner piece matches up to your other end. And that's probably easier for most of you guys out there. The corner pieces actually do work for these straight edges too, but they're a little bit more difficult because they're just kind of floating in there. They don't have a really good lock system for those corners, and that's why I prefer to do the 45 cuts. So for that reason alone, I'm going to show how to do a 45 cut, and I don't have a square or rectangular tiled area to show you how to wrap it around. So for the purposes of just showing you how to do the cuts and all that stuff, I'm just going to use this square piece of tile, and I'm going to do all 4 corners and match all 4 corners up with a piece of this stuff. I don't know which one I'll choose. So I'm going to measure edge to edge, and it should be about the same. So I got 11.5 and 11.5. So I already know that. So I'm going to take one of these small guys right here, and I'm going to round off the edge, or get a square anyway. As I said before, it makes it much easier to use a scrap piece of wood, and you're going to go through quite a few pieces. You don't have to go all the way through the wood, but it's a little hard not to. So you're going to do your 45 cut along here, and you can even mark it. And I'll usually mark one edge, and then I'll do my measurement. So the 45, you just set it right there to lock right in, and you set your piece of wood right at that edge. Boom, you have a 45 cut. Now what happens is you have a little boogering of that aluminum that's going on there. You want to have some sheet metal cutters, and the sheet metal cutters, you're going to cut off. You don't want this edge anyway. You don't want it square. In other words, straight across here. You want to cut off at an angle when you're doing around a niche, because you don't want this bottom piece in there. The 2 pieces will not match up if this bottom edge is there, so you cut it off like so. Then you get yourself a little file, a very small metal file, and you can actually feel the little burrs on the edge of here. Well, you can see them now. And so all you're doing is kind of filing off those burrs. And on the outside edge where it's showing, you have to be very, very careful, because there's going to be a little burring going on over here too. And very, very carefully at an angle going that direction, so as not to scratch up your trim. You just kind of deburr with this little file and get it smooth. And then you can clean off this other edge. Be a little bit more rough with it, because you're not going to mess anything up. I usually go to the very end there because it's pretty sharp. I'll take a little bit of that off. Then I'll give it another feel. Do a little bit more scratching on it with the file. And now we've got a clean edge. And I'm going to swing it around. And again, for safety reasons, I always like to have my profile on the inside of the saw up against the fence here. That just makes it a little bit safer for me. And then I'm going to swing this around for my next 45. See if I can see my mark. A little bit hard to see. And you can see that other end flew out, and that's what I was talking about, the danger that you can get into, because that sucker just went and flew. So that end, I'll cut that off. That end is a little harder to cut because it's a left side cut, and I'm not left-handed, so I have a little bit more. I always cut a tad bit more than I think I need, because it's easier to cut some off later than to realize that you're short on your cut. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off the little piece that I need, in this direction, which makes my life a lot easier. I went off camera and I cut both of my long pieces, my 11.5. I already pre-cut them. So if you see on here, if I go end to end with the piece of tile on both of these pre-cut pieces, see that? Now all I have to do is these short pieces to kind of trim everything out. And that's where things get a little bit tricky, because you have to be exactly to get those ends to match up perfectly. And if you don't, you have to do a little trimming. And it's not the easiest thing to trim these pieces, as you've already seen. It can get a little dangerous. In the end, that's kind of what you want it to look like. You want it to be 45 at each corner with a very small gap, if any. You know, get them as close as you can possible. But again, I'm not usually doing it on a face. I'm doing it in a square box area, which is much easier to measure and distinguish the exact size and all that stuff. I have these things propped up because it's not really supposed to set flush against the tile. But you kind of get the gist of what's going on here. And so I'll do one of these scrap box pieces that I have, because I'll probably never use that one there, that green one. I'll never use that one again, I'm sure. Also, there's another way to do these, which would just require the opposite 45 cut. So you can imagine, some people don't want all this silver to show. So they're just going to have a cleaner, tighter edge as if it was on a floor. And that's you know, I've done both before. So the way this would go in, if you were doing, say, a niche, and you're looking directly at the niche of the wall, that tile, the way I'm doing it now, that tile would show, in other words, it would cover up that edge of the tile, and all of that transition strip would show, and then you would have the opposing tile where the end of my thumb is going downward. So that would be, say, the bottom of your niche, and you do your 45s just like that at the edge. Right, just like that. So it would cover up all the way, all four sides around. Touch this out. All these line up a lot better, because I'm not used to doing it on a flat surface. As I said, I have the parameter of a box. So that's a pretty good look right there, without the tile in the way, without my issues that I'm having not being in a box. But if you were doing a niche, this is kind of sort of how it would look. Well, it's exactly how it would look. And then the existing field tile below it and to the left of it would surround it. And then you end up with the... Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.